Time now for Focus, and today's report is from the Libyan city of Sabratha, on the coast west of Tripoli. It used to be a major people-smuggling hub, but in 2017 the city's top smuggler was forced out, and now migrant departures for Europe are far less frequent. But, as our reporters Julie Dungelheoff and James André found, Sabratha is still vulnerable to surrounding militias.
Sabratha's anti-migration police have just picked up these three men who had come to ask for help at the mosque.
And you? And you, brother?
I come from
Ethiopia. And you?
You are journalist?
Eritrea.
They have spent the night hiding in a nearby forest.
He helped me. I get one country.
We're going to interrogate them. Then we'll know if they were abducted or if they fled.
The migrants say they were held for 2 years by traffickers, but managed to escape.
Wallahi, it's so dark place. Macaroni, بس يأكل macaroni. Wallahi, we died. Many people died in that place. The girl, with the born. She born 7 days. She born. The bird 7 days. She died. The boy died.
We are there for 2 years. For 2 years. Locked up. It's a hell. When you see it, it's a big place. It's a big place, and there is a lot of people in there. We suffered a lot. Do you see this guy? Starting from my hair to my neck. They broke a bottle in.
The migrants are kept inside a small cell at the back of the building. They are not free. They are effectively under arrest.
I want to go to the UN. I want to ask them. I want to tell them all the things that happened to me. And they will understand me. They will send me to the country which I want.
At this stage, no one knows what will happen to these men.
If they want to return to their home country, it's easy. But if they want to stay or return to Europe, they'll be placed in a shelter. But that's a problem, because some people have been waiting there for over 7 months. No one's interested in our brigade, not the government nor the international community. We've got very limited means. We manage to function because local residents lend us a hand. We're getting by, but for how much longer? Without more support, maybe 2 or 3 years. In the long run, the situation is sure to get out of hand again.
The anti-migration brigade is also supposed to track and arrest smugglers. An impossible task. They face well-armed gangs who are trying to retake the city. The last attack on Sabratha took place on the 4th of November. 3 people were killed. We are driven around town by an intelligence officer who does not want to be filmed.
You see this building? This is where El Amu dug himself in during the battle. Look.
This is El Amu, the uncle, one of Libya's most powerful migrant smugglers. He controlled the city until he was forced out in October 2017. Since, both departures have reduced drastically. He is wanted and under UN sanctions, but for the time being he is free in neighboring Zawiya. We are taken to Major Colonel Omar Abdel, who drove the smugglers out. He is keen to show us the city is under control.
Some cities are still held hostage by militias. It's the case around here, like in Zawiya, for instance. The attack was launched from there on the 4th of November. But one day, we will clean up all these cities, just like we have cleaned up Sabratha.
Despite our repeated requests, authorities in Tripoli never granted us access to film in Zawiya. The coastline in Sabratha is dotted with the makeshift jetties built by the smugglers to embark migrants. Lampedusa Island, the gate to Italy, is merely 300 kilometers north. The industrial scale of the human trafficking that took place here is still very visible. This abandoned tuna factory used to be one of the main hubs for migrants wanting to cross the Mediterranean. Thousands of them have boarded boats on this very spot on their way to Italy. Right now, local authorities control this place, and they want to believe the problem is solved. But around Sabratha, there are militias headed by smugglers who try on a regular basis to attack and retake this place.
And James André is here with me in the studio. James, thanks for coming in. Now, the migrants we saw in your report, how did they end up in Sabratha?
Well, basically, what all the migrants are telling us, we spoke to many of them, we were there for 10 days, is pretty much always the same story. If you take the case of someone, for example, leaving Eritrea, he will have crossed Sudan, Chad, found himself in Niger, and then from Niger, the idea is to get through the border to Libya, and that is a huge desertic area which is not really controlled, or if it is controlled by militias that actually run human smuggling. Now, usually when they get to that stage, they cross into Libya and then start paying a first group. The problem is, what happens afterwards is that usually these first smugglers that get them across the desert then sell them on arrival when they get pretty close to the coast to other smuggler groups. And this is where what these people describes actually happens. That means that they are usually detained in large buildings where you have large groups of people, and then they will be usually mistreated, because one of the objectives of that second round of traffickers, if you will, is to try and extort money from their families. So this is where they will potentially be tortured. Usually there's lack of food, there's no space, they are locked down, and the traffickers will contact the families in the original countries and say, right, you need to wire us, it depends, 500 euros, 700 euros, 1,000 euros, so we stop, torturing your son or nephew or what have you. So this is one stage, and then eventually, if these smugglers manage to make enough money out of these migrants, they eventually take them to the coast, and this is what we saw in Sabratha. These are these pictures. You have to realize that Sabratha really was the capital of human smuggling on the Libyan coast. Thousands of migrants took boats from there, and this carried on until October 2017. The thing is, now European ports have closed their doors, and I think we have a map. I'd just like to show you how there's also another fact that, there we are, the borders here on the sea have been redesigned as of June 2018, and so you see, this is the Libyan search and rescue area. This has been extended. It didn't used to exist. And these red dots here are the incidents involving migrant ships. Now, since basically the ports in Italy mainly have been closed, well, indeed, the migrants have had more and more difficulties indeed to cross, and a lot of them actually have problems in the very first part of this trip. So they sink in what are now Libyan search and rescue areas. So the Libyan search and rescue will go and save them and bring them back onto the Libyan coast. Now, the big problem is, as far as international law is concerned, well, the fact of the matter is, yes, they are under Libyan jurisdiction, and it's normal that the Libyans save them, but then they're brought back onto the Libyan coast, and technically, people who are asylum seekers or people who basically are rescued at sea have to be brought back to a safe port, and the UN has declared ports in Libya unsafe.
Now, officials would have us believe that Sabratha is no longer a big departure point for migrants hoping to reach Europe. Is that really the case?
Now, it's true that the traffic has been stemmed. We talk about El Armo in that report. El Armo, the uncle, that's what it means in English, was the main trafficker in Sabratha. Now, there is a kind of a competition amongst the cities along that coast. Right next to Sabratha, you have another city which is called Zawiya. Zawiya is held by another trafficker warlord called Albija. He's still there. And he was actually seen as a solution by the Europeans at one stage, who indeed, he presented himself as a coast guard, and so they equipped him, they trained his men, and now he is on a sanction list by the UN. But in Sabratha, indeed, El Armo was forced out. He went to Zawiya. He is now in Zawiya, working with Albija. They used to be enemies, but they're now in the same city. Difficult to know if they're actually friends or not, but anyway, that's the situation. Now, the authorities have taken control of Sabratha, and as you've seen, those buildings that used to be used by the traffickers are now empty. But the fact of the matter is, there are still boats leaving from Sabratha, and actually yesterday, a boat with 10 people on board washed up on the shore in Misrata. Now that's about 300 kilometers to the east. They set off from Sabratha. Their boat broke down in the Mediterranean, and then they drifted for 11 days with no food and no water, and eventually ended up in Misrata. On that boat, there were 25 people. 15 of them died at sea, and 10 actually eventually arrived in Misrata. But they say they started in Sabratha, and that tends to prove that there are still boats leaving from Sabratha.
All right, well, thanks very much, James, for coming in to tell us about your reporter, and you brought back a series of reports. Thank you very much.